Over the next several minutes, I will be addressing 3 topics on immigration. First, the benefits of immigration. Second, the cautions of immigration. And third, current U.S. policies on immigration. But before I dive into these 3 topics, let's look at the definition of immigration and study its historical background. According to Merriam-Webster, immigration, first coined in the 17th century, is defined as an act or instance of immigrating, specifically for the travel into a country for the purpose of permanent residence. According to the U.S. Department of State, approximately 40 million foreign-born persons live in the U.S. These 40 million represent nearly 13% of the entire U.S. population. First and second generation immigrants to the U.S. have won 65% of Nobel Prizes awarded for work here. This 65% accounts for nearly 1/3 of the total physicists, engineers, and doctors in the United States. Over the past 229 years, from 1790 to the present time, the United States has seen an increase in immigration reform. The Naturalization Act of 1790 was the first law that specified who could be granted citizenship in the U.S. The Steerage Act of 1819 created the first federal records on the ethnic composition of immigrants entering the U.S. The first political anti-immigration party, known as the Know Nothing Party, was formed in 1849. In 1880, millions of European immigrants come to the U.S. seeking work, mostly in factories. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act is passed, which officially bars Chinese immigrants from entering the U.S. The Immigration Act of 1891 barred certain immigrants from entering the U.S., regardless of race. 1907 saw a high peak in immigration, with 1.3 million people entering the U.S. through Ellis Island alone. New York City's population alone in 1910 is estimated to be 3/4 immigrants and first-generation Americans. The Immigration Act of 1917 created a literacy requirement for new immigrants trying to enter the U.S. The Immigration Act of 1924 created the first yearly quota on the number of immigrants entering the U.S. The Braceo program was created in 1942, allowing Mexican agricultural workers to enter the U.S. in a temporary status. In 1948, the U.S. passed the first refugee and resettlement law to combat the aftermath of World War II Europeans seeking permanent residence. The McCarran-Walter Act ended the exclusion of Asians in 1952. Over 125,000 Cuban refugees arrived in Florida seeking political asylum in 1980. The Simpson-Mazzoli Act granted amnesty to more than 3 million illegal immigrants living in the U.S. in 1986. The first Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act, also known as the DREAM Act, was created in 2001 but failed to pass. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is signed in 2012 but does not provide a pathway to citizenship. In 2017, Executive Order 13767 is signed as a directive to begin construction on a border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. In 2018, Central American migrant caravans began their long journey to the U.S. from countries such as Honduras and Guatemala. Most recently, in 2019, President Donald Trump has threatened to close all ports of entry between the U.S. and Mexico if the Mexican government does not stop the flow of migrant caravans trying to make their way to the U.S. According to the National Academies of Sciences, immigration is integral to the United States' economic growth. Immigration supplies workers who have helped the United States to avoid the problems facing stagnant economies created by unfavorable demographics. In fact, according to a 2017 report, The Economic and Fiscal Consequences of Immigration, first-generation immigrants cost the government more than native-born Americans, roughly $1,600 per person annually. However, second-generation immigrants are among the strongest physical and economic contributors in the United States. contributing roughly $1,700 per person annually. All other native-born Americans, including third-generation immigrants, contribute roughly $1,300 per year on average. Immigration breeds diversity, and diversity enhances creativity. Engaging in diversity will help one discover new ideas, create new inventions, and develop improved decision-making abilities that can positively affect problem-solving. When looking at the benefits of diversity, it is also important to note that diverse cultures help foster a sense of acceptance. This is important because as a country, the United States is a mixture of cultures with different practices. This is what makes America great. Nations that receive diverse immigrants and allow these immigrants to incorporate their diverse cultures in their daily lives and in their communities will find that their nation grows and flourishes over time. Being introduced to new cultures is a positive experience for both those sharing their culture and those experiencing the new culture. Being a country that is home to many cultures, we find that being multicultural is important because it helps to weaken and dissolve the disruptiveness of ignorance. Multiculturalism also breeds and encourages open dialogue between different cultures that might have different ideals, beliefs, and customs. And finally, multiculturalism helps to tear down the wall of ignorance between cultures and helps to create a bridge that connects intolerance with acceptance. When looking at the employment dynamics of immigration, H-1B and other skilled worker visa programs impact U.S. citizens' access to jobs, particularly in the high-tech industries. In addition, under H-1B, employers save billions of dollars annually because they are not required to pay minimum wages or other benefits. In fact, companies can use H-1B labor to replace skilled citizen workers with low-wage skilled workers from abroad. Furthermore, when looking at illegal immigrants in relation to employment dynamics, these individuals typically take the low-skilled and labor-intensive jobs away from U.S. citizens. Illegal immigrant labor can create a surplus of workers, which can lead to depressed wages in the low-skilled labor market. Immigration, both legal and illegal, can lead to overcrowding of public institutions and public services, such as overcrowding in schools, and the overwhelming of public services, such as hospital emergency rooms. A few examples of overcrowding can be seen in a 2014 statistic, in which, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, 63% of non-citizen-headed households used at least one welfare program versus 35% of citizen-headed households. 45% of non-citizen households used food programs versus 21% for citizen-headed households. And 50% of non-citizen individuals used Medicaid versus 23% for citizens. Criminal aliens make up over 27% of federal prisoners, compared to only 9% of the overall U.S. population. And in order to combat these threats, the Border Patrol's budget increased by 380%, from $1.1 billion a year to nearly $3.8 billion a year between 2000 and 2017. According to the White House, the United States must adopt an immigration system that serves the national interest. To restore the rule of law and secure our border, President Trump is committed to constructing a border wall and ensuring the swift removal of unlawful entrants. To protect American workers, the president supports ending chain migration, eliminating the visa lottery, and moving the country to a merit-based entry system. These reforms will advance the safety and prosperity of all Americans while helping new citizens assimilate and flourish. Let's look at the current policies in the United States. First, we find that President Trump has increased interior enforcement. In fact, between 20 January and 30 September 2017, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, removed 61,094 non-citizens from the interior of the country, which was an increase of 37% over the same period back in 2016. ICE also made 110,568 arrests, which was a 42% increase from 2016. Second, President Trump has increased participation in 287G programs. Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act allows the federal government to enter into agreements with state law enforcement in order to assist with the investigation, apprehension, or detention of removable non-citizens. Cities who label themselves as sanctuary cities will now face hardship from the government as federal dollars will now be withheld until cities comply. The administration has also increased law enforcement within these cities. Third, there has been a reduced number of refugee admissions, from 110,000 in fiscal year 2017 to only 45,000 in fiscal year 2018, which was the lowest level since 1980. Refugee applications have also gone through extreme vetting for those from 11 high-risk countries, which also led to a reduction in the numbers. And finally, President Trump has started to phase out the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival program, as well as the temporary protected status for nationals who are offered humanitarian protection from various countries in violent conflict or suffering from natural disasters. With the information presented here, I now ask you, how does this information build the narrative around immigration, diversity, and equity within the United States? Looking at the country holistically, who is benefiting from and who is being harmed by actions taken against immigration? And finally, thinking about American ideals, how would our current practices and policies reflect our beliefs as a nation?